West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer.
Over Memorial Day weekend, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton was impeached by an overwhelming majority of Democrats and his fellow Republicans. He now has the special honor of being just the third state official in Texas history and the first in a half century to be temporarily removed from office. Paxton is no stranger to corruption. One could argue it's sort of his thing. He's been under investigation in one form or another for nearly a decade. The 20 articles of impeachment include breathtaking charges of abuse of office, adultery, bribery, and unethical behavior. He's set to stand trial in the state Senate, where Republicans outnumber Democrats 19-12. And let's not get it twisted. Texas Republicans voted to impeach not because they've had some come to Jesus about good governance. They did it because they were annoyed that Paxton got caught and was trying to make Texas taxpayers pay for his $3 million mistake. Right on cue, Donald Trump rode to Paxton's rescue, attacking state Republicans for impeaching him. Paxton and Trump have had a symbiotic relationship. Back in 2020, Paxton sued to challenge the results in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Before that, he successfully sued the state's most populous county, Harris County, which happens to be heavily Democratic, to prevent them from using universal mail-in ballots. And he was pretty proud of it.
We had 12 losses that we had to win. And if we had lost one of them, like if we lost Harris County, Trump won by 620,000 votes in Texas. Harris County mail-in ballots that they wanted to send out were 2.5 million. Those were all illegal, and we were able to stop every one of them. Had we not done that, we would have been in the very same situation. We would have been on election night. I was watching election night, and I knew when I saw what was happening in these other states that would have been Texas. We would have been in the same boat. We would have been one of those battleground states that they were counting votes in Harris County for 3 days, and Donald Trump would have lost the election.
While Texas House Republicans impeach that guy, they continue to target Democratic counties in the state. Governor Abbott is expected to sign several bills into law that would, among other things, allow the Secretary of State, who is handpicked by the governor, to redo any election in Harris County. Joining me now is Matthew Dowd, MSNBC political analyst and former candidate for lieutenant governor of Texas. Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee will be joining us in a moment. But I do want to start with you, Matthew, because this revelation, this braggadocio by Greg Abbott, the corrupt and indicted and now impeached Attorney General of Texas, it actually answered a question for me. Why is Texas, which has a majority minority population, so red? Harris County is 4.6 million of the state's 29 million people. It's the largest county by far. Dallas County, the next largest county, is about 2.6 million people. If you control it and suppress its votes, voila, Republicans can't lose statewide. Your thoughts?
Well, Texas, I mean, it's just one of many instances where they've made Texas one of the, I think it's the hardest state to vote in the country when you combine registration with that. That wasn't the case 25 years ago before Republicans took power. Texas used to be the 14th ranked state in ease of voting, and now it's 50th in the ease of voting. All of this has to do with the changing nature of Texas. And I'll give you one interesting fact. Between the 2020 census and between the 2010 census and the 2020 census, Texas added 4 million people. 4 million people were added in Texas. 95% of the people that were added were non-white. 95% of the increased population was Hispanic, Black, and Asian in Texas. They understand demographics. And so instead of doing, what's amazing about what Ken Paxton said, which is, I want to make it harder for people to vote. That's basically what he said. I don't want to give the people the opportunity to vote. I want to make it hard. That is the case in Texas and other states, as you know, because we've had this conversation. They can't win an election that looks like Texas. Republican, if the election day looked like Texas, they can't win. They could appeal to, people of non-white Texans. They don't want to. And so what do? They rig the system so the election doesn't look like Texas.
And just down to the fact that Texas, we counted it up today. They have like over 200 different districts, some as small as 89 people in some of these rural districts. And then you've got these 3 or 4 giant districts that have 1 million or more people that are the more blue tinged districts. That is how you construct a state where you make most of the districts these tiny little rural districts. Let's just look at Harris County. Statewide, Trump versus Biden. Statewide, it was tight, 5.9 million for Trump, 5.2 million for Biden. But in Harris County, Biden beat Trump, 918,000 to 700,000. Go back to 2016, it's also close, 4.6 million statewide to 3.8. I think people don't understand. That's not a huge margin. Democrats are pretty competitive, but in Harris County, the Democrats win. They are now attempting to dissolve the Harris County election administrator. This is the Republicans who impeached Paxton, not Paxton himself. Empower the Secretary of State to seize election authority from county officials. Authorize a new election if there are good causes to a recurring pattern of problems. They can redo the election, pull Texas out of the Electronic Registration Information Center where you can get voting data, and increase the penalty for illegal voting from misdemeanor to a felony. They are rigging this state, Matthew.
Well, it's fascinating. As you know, I used to run campaigns in Texas back years ago, and it was common, thought is Harris County, Houston, is going to vote Republican. And so you figure out the margins you need there and then the margins you need in another place. Dallas County was the same way. Another county, let me give you a prediction. The next legislative session, they're going to go after Dallas County. That'll be the next place they go. And what's happened is the changing nature of Texas is Harris County is now from a red county to a blue county. Dallas County is from a red county to a blue county. And so what they're doing is sort of de-emphasizing or making it them give those counties, larger counties, less power in the state, because if what they voted was equal to the rest of the counties, the small counties, Democrats would win. And on that data you showed from the 2020 election, when 5.9 million voted for Trump and 5.5 million Texans who were registered didn't vote. 5.5, that's unregistered. 5.5 million Texans in the presidential election in 2020 were registered and did not vote. That's the problem.
Speaking of Harris County, let me bring in Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who represents Harris County. You have hopefully been able to hear what we've been talking about, Congresswoman. How does that materially impact people in Harris County that 4.6 million people are essentially disenfranchised, and the Attorney General, the impeached Attorney General of your state, is bragging about doing it?
It is a horror of proportions that one cannot imagine. And that means that all of the fight that was ever made in the civil rights movement and before, the lives lost, the civil rights soldiers, gone to naught. Because here we are in 2023 with conspicuous denial of voting rights. Added to that, on June 1st, the state will take over a duly elected school board for the Houston Independent School District. They will be thrown out, and there will be an appointed board of managers that no one knows who they are. So from overturning our elections by one person, the governor of the state of Texas, at his own will, by taking away our whole administrative infrastructure, that the voters have voted on by voting on the public officials who designed it, we're basically extinguishing our constitutional rights to vote, because I believe the 15th Amendment gives us a framework for voting. And I certainly think the 13th Amendment indicates to African Americans that they're no longer enslaved and they have the rights and privileges of a citizen of the United States. This includes, however, Hispanics, African Americans, progressive, women.
It is Thursday, the 1st of June of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our door girl, will be seating you directly for our fabulous and very special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, because we can only take a little. Many of us, only a small smidgen. Don't make it too spicy, but we better have some spice, okay? At least throw some curry in the mayo, okay? Give it a kick. Bam. Okay. How are you today? We got a budget, it's not even a budget bill. Budget ceiling. No. We did the great task of making sure that the people who want to overthrow the United States of America didn't tank our economy. Now, I suppose we should be patting ourselves on the back as if that's some great accomplishment, but I don't know, was it? Yeah, actually, I think it is. Joe showed that for a guy who apparently can't find his pants, he beat the pants off of them. They can't find their pants now. Where are they? Yeah, he vaporized them, the pants. And they still are trying to figure out what the hell happened. They know something happened. They're kind of pissed off. Boy, I love how the media calls the Nazis in the Republican Party the Freedom Caucus. Just call them the Nazis. It's less characters, and it doesn't fill up the real estate on the screen. Real estate, this. Well, we have quite a day here in real life, quite a busy day. It being the first, of course, banking chores and whatnot. But we also are continuing with, tests and appointments, medical appointments for Mom. She's doing actually okay, though. I'll give you a little bit of, a little bit of the personal. Part of a deterioration, as we know, when one's family member has dementia, is that you can notice that they get agitated and, you can't figure out why. At least I can't. I mean, I have my suspicions, but I can't put what my view and ability to reason things out onto my mom, who's obviously losing some of her ability to reason. When things that she hears or sees or thinks are so real to her. So that said, we were at the doctor's yesterday, the primary, and for some reason on the way there, she started getting into a funk, and I don't know why, other than the fact that, who knows, she was in her head while we were driving in the car, and it didn't take us very long. I mean, 15 minutes or so, not that long. But she was in quite a dour mood when we were in there, and our doctor, he's a new one, new in the sense that for the better part of 10 years, we had another doctor who unfortunately, I think I've mentioned this before, but he passed. He had his own depression, and so you can surmise what happened there. And my mom's still not getting over that. And but regardless, this new fellow is he's young. I mean, because we're so old now, aren't we? But he's a relatively new doctor. I mean, within the last 7 years. So I consider that to be relatively new. But regardless, he actually recognized a lot of that and spent more time with her than I thought we were, that was normal in today's new Agogo society of medical care. And he was quite hands-on and kind of drew her out and got her to smile. And I thought that was rather grand. So, but a couple of different points during the day yesterday, Mom, got agitated as if, I don't know, it was like she was being persecuted in some way, and I couldn't figure out where she was feeling or got the idea there was a persecution going on or making her feel persecuted, especially since we weren't talking. So I had to sort of pat her hand a couple of times during the day and give her a hug and tell her it's okay, and kind of calmed her down. So, but regardless, it could be a UTI. I don't know. We'll find out. That's I got to go by the clinic and drop off a lab specimen. You know what that is. Because UTIs have a profound effect on one's mental outlook and disposition, especially when getting old. And she's older than us. Not much, but she is. So I'm sorry to get into the, I don't know, gross personal? Is that gross? I don't know. But we got a lot of running around to do today, so why don't we just dive in to what we have in store for you here in this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yeah, at the top, Paxton sued the Dem stronghold of Harris County in 2020 to block the use of universal mail-in ballots, and that mofo is bragging about it. And he's impeached. All right. Well, as Joy pointed out, these Republicans in Texas didn't impeach him because of some malfeasance or, breaking the law. They impeached him because he's trying to stick the state, basically paying his legal bills. Okay. All right. Yeah, you don't make the Don. You don't make the boss of the criminal enterprise pay the bills for your F-ups. They only let you get away with that for so long. And apparently, it's over for old Ken. All right. Anyway, on the rest of the menu, here's some local flavor and spice, if you're into that. But anyway, after 115 years, the Josephine County, Oregon Board of Supervisors defunded 4-H for being woke. 4-H! Get out of here. Hey, Tuberville's national security advisor resigned after a report on his role in stalling military promotions. And a California judge dismissed all charges against Pacific Gas and Electric in connection to a 2020 fatal wildfire that destroyed hundreds of homes and killed 4 people, including an 8-year-old. All charges dismissed. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a priceless painting looted by Nazis during World War II has returned to Poland from Japan. And an unprecedented wildfire on Canada's Atlantic coast is still burning after 5 days. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending Netroots Nation in Chicago this year, so we are looking forward to that, and thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it helps us pay our bills and all the other costs incurred in running this powerhouse of resistance. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds to us once a month, it really does help us pay those bills and those costs incurred. So thank you to those of you who have been so generous. And I've noticed that some people have actually upped their patronage, monthly patronage to us. So thank you for that. All right. If you'd like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter while we're still there, and certainly on Mastodon and Spoutable, you can do so by going to @NetrootsRadio, and Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing so and everything else that he and Kelly does. Thank you both. Follow me on Twitter and Mastodon and Spoutable @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And you can find the show notes and links, all of them, by going to my social media feeds, because the link to get to Daily Co's is right there. You can follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts. Please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Lisa Dunlap of the Daily Courier, which is in Grants Pass, Oregon. Josephine County Commissioners rejected the recommendation of a budget committee and voted to stop local tax funding for the Oregon State University Extension Service, including local 4-H programs, saying the group has a woke agenda, is not serving area youth in the way voters intended. Really? The Josephine County 4-H Extension Service District's Budget Committee, comprised of 3 citizens and the 3 county commissioners, met on Tuesday morning in Basker Auditorium. The committee voted 4-2 to approve the budget presented by Josephine County Extension Service Office Manager Kayla Sheets and the Southern Region Director Jamie Davis. But immediately following that vote, the Board of Commissioners convened and voted 2-1 to approve the budget, but to eliminate the service district's tax levy, which currently stands at about 4.6 cents per $1,000 of assessed property value. That tax was expected to bring in about $414,000 for the coming fiscal year, which starts in a month on July 1st. The decision was telegraphed earlier this month by the commissioners, who had accused the Extension Service's 4-H program during a presentation on May 10th of barring youths from displaying Christian symbols on their clothing. Leaders disputed that their staff had been involved in that. On Tuesday, Sheets and Davis said several times that the service district was approved by voters in 1996, not only to support 4-H clubs, which they conceded, has seen a dip in membership since 2020. Gee, pandemic, I wonder if that had something to do with it. But also a wide variety of other agricultural and educational programs. I wish you guys would hear our side, she said, because it seems like you are hearing a lot of the other side. She said she thought a lot of the criticism was based on exaggerated and inaccurate information and lacked understanding of all extension programs. This is through Oregon State University. So you know where these, I call them Nazis on the Board of Commissioners or Supervisors, Commissioners, because that's what they are. if you know how it works here in Southern Oregon. So, I understand completely what you do, Commission Chairman Herman Bashiger Jr. responded, but the facts are you had the vast majority of your 4-H kids leave your program. That's fact. You're talking about what really happened? That's what really happened. It was because of COVID. But they didn't want anyone to wear masks, and these, these anti-vax folk, who this guy is one of them, tried to make it so that you can't wear a mask. Cannot wear a mask. He was voted down, fortunately. He was joined by John West in the committee vote against the budget and the commission vote to eliminate the tax. Dan DeYoung voted opposite of them both times. This is painting the whole 4-H program with a pretty broad brush, DeYoung said during the discussion of the commission meeting motion. I think there is probably a lot of good things in the 4-H program other than what we have concerns of. Like I said, I would like to see us hold off on that until next year and pass this budget. Now, I'm going to skip to the chase here and explain what happened. They're bent out of shape because apparently 4-H and the Oregon State University Extension Service has denied some 4-H members from wearing crosses on their 4-H uniforms, whatever that is. These guys have I don't think they ever took part in 4-H, and they're supposedly part of our rural community. 4-H has been part of the fabric of rural communities for quite some time. County fairs always have 4-H programs where you get to get awards for growing a pig. Oh my God. And as it turns out, they cannot cite what 4-H club chapter did this. They heard about it somewhere. They know it to be true, even though they can't find where it is. They think it's being hid from them. A vast conspiracy. Caravans of scary gay clowns coming to take over our community. They're afraid of rainbows, too, I might add. Wagner of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The National Security Advisor to Senator Tommy Tuberville, Repug from Alabama, has resigned after the Washington Post disclosed in a story that he presented Tuberville with the highly controversial strategy of stalling scores of senior military nominations in an attempt to stop a new Defense Department policy that helps ensure access to abortions for service members. In an email to colleagues Tuesday night obtained by the Post, Morgan Murphy shared that it was his last day working for Tuberville. Today is my last day with Coach, the best boss I've ever had, Murphy wrote, using Tuberville's nickname, which comes from his former role as a college football coach. It's been an honor to work with each of you these past 2.5 years, and I hope you'll keep in touch with me, he continued in an accent completely made up on the spot, right here, in fact. The Post reported that on Friday last that Murphy had presented Tuberville with multiple options for trying to block the Pentagon's abortion travel policy, which the senator opposes. After the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and some states began to ban or tightly restrict abortion, the military enacted a policy that reimburses travel costs and provides leave for service members who seek the procedure. Tuberville chose the strategy of using his senatorial powers to delay military promotions that are subject to confirmation by the chamber. More than 200 promotions, which are typically approved swiftly, meaning pro forma, with no controversy, have since been stalled. The goal was to get the secretary to respond, Murphy told the Post, for the story that was published last week. Politico was the first to report on Wednesday yesterday that Murphy has resigned. Murphy did not immediately respond to the Post's request for a comment on his departure, and Tuberville's office declined to comment. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A California judge yesterday, Wednesday, dismissed all charges against Pacific Gas and Electric in connection to a 2020 fatal wildfire sparked by its equipment that destroyed hundreds of homes and killed 4 people, including an 8-year-old. The utility also reached a $50 million settlement agreement with the Shasta County District Attorney's Office, officials from both announced in separate statements. The wind-whipped blaze began on September 27th of 2020 and raged through rugged terrain in small communities west of Redding, killing 4 people, burning about 200 homes, and blackening about 87 square miles of land in Shasta and Tehama counties. In 2021, state fire investigators concluded the fire was sparked by a gray pine tree that fell onto a PG&E distribution line. Shasta and Tehama counties sued the utility alleging negligence. They said PG&E failed to remove the tree even though it had been marked for removal 2 years earlier. The utility says the tree was subsequently cleared to stay. I wonder why. Shasta County District Attorney Stephanie Bridget determined that the company was criminally liable for the fire and charged the utility later that year. Shasta Superior Court Judge Daniel E. Flynn disagreed and in a tentative ruling ahead of a hearing yesterday, Wednesday, said prosecutors did not present enough evidence to show PG&E engaged in criminal conduct, according to the Sacramento Bee, which obtained a copy of the ruling. The tree was not a known risk prior to the Zod fire, and there is no evidence to support the people's claim in their opposition that it was, the judge wrote. The utility said in a statement that under the agreement with Shasta County, which is subject to court approval, it will fund $45 million in contributions to organizations dedicated to rebuilding and assisting local communities. The company will also pay a $5 million civil penalty to the company. Bridget said her goal was always to take PG&E to trial and hold them criminally responsible, but that Flynn's tentative ruling changed her position, and she agreed to a settlement that includes dropping all charges. Well, money doesn't only talk, it also swears, according to Bob Dylan and the rest of us as well. So that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You're listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
You're listening to Scientific American's Science Quickly, and I'm Flora Lichtman. This week, I want to take you bird watching, but I'm not talking about an ordinary passerine peep show. We are skipping the songbirds. It's a no-fly zone for hawks and raptors. Waterfowl, throw in the towel. The birds we're going to meet, they're not like anything you've ever peeped.
They use the beak as an axe to kill prey.
Oh my God.
So just imagine the largest thing you've ever seen alive flying.
They are colossal, around 1,900 pounds.
The eggs would have been about 150 times the size of a chicken egg.
2 feet for feathers, which is, that's a big feather.
Most people, think ostrich and they think that's big, but actually they were real giants around at one time.
We are talking about birds that weighed as much as a sports car. Birds who were the top predators of their day, prowling the jungle and devouring animals the size of small horses. Birds so gargantuan that you could mistake them for an airplane. And yet, these birds have kind of flown under the radar of paleontology, at least compared with many dinosaurs. These winged whoppers are mysterious, and scientists are learning more about them every day. For the next 4 episodes of Science Quickly, I'm going to introduce you to them. We are hunting for the most extreme birds to ever live. Welcome to part 1 of a 4-part fascination on the real big birds. I want you to meet one of our guides.
My name is Daniel Sepka.
Dan's an avian paleontologist.
And I am the curator of science at the Bruce Museum.
What's your relationship to big extinct birds?
I love them and they love me.
Okay, so I want you to close your eyes. And Dan is going to set the scene for the first monster we're going to meet.
Imagine you're standing in South Carolina 27 million years ago. You're looking out over the sea. Some rough waves, and then just hanging in the air, blocking out the sun. The largest thing you've ever seen alive flying, like a double albatross, like this wingspan of 20 feet. So that's pretty magnificent. If it flies over you, it's probably like the moment of your whole lifetime. The wonder of seeing that.
The bird's name is Pelagornis sandersi. Doesn't have a common name.
I just call it Pelagornis. I don't call it like Bobby or anything.
Dan was the first to scientifically describe this fossil, and we'll get to why he named it P. sandersi in a minute. That story starts when the fossil flew into his life out of the blue.
Pelagornis was totally an accident of luck and fortune.
Dan didn't find the fossil. It had been excavated in South Carolina back in the 80s, long before Dan ever laid eyes on it.
They were doing excavations at Charleston Airport, and someone hit some bones with, some kind of digging equipment, and they stopped the work.
And called in some backup. The late Al Sanders, a paleontologist at the local Charleston Museum.
And he came down there with a team and they collected it. And then, I would have thought that anyone who found this would stop dead in their tracks and make it their priority because it was the largest flying bird ever.
At least that's what an avian paleontologist would have done. But Al Sanders was more of a whale fossil guy. So he brought the fossil back to the museum and tucked it away.
Al just had it in a drawer in the bottom of this cabinet in the museum.
And it sat there for about 30 years. Then one day, Al told Dan about the bones. And Dan wasn't expecting much.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see the largest bird ever in a drawer when I went down there. I would have been happy with a duck or something.
Sitting in that drawer, collecting dust, was a roughly 27 million year old fossil that didn't look like anything Dan had ever seen before.
Just took the wing bone out and put it on the floor and laid down next to it. Took a picture with my cell phone because it was longer than my whole arm, like one of the 3 bones.
Dan named it Pelagornis Sanders' eye in honor of Al Sanders, the unknowing keeper of this truly massive discovery. And Dan set out to understand all he could about this bird. And he found out that the bird's 20-foot wingspan wasn't the only astonishing thing about it. This bird wasn't just big, it was bizarre.
I couldn't believe the skull. It doesn't look anything like a bird. It almost looks like a small alligator.
Its 1.5-foot long beak was packed with chompers.
They have these false teeth.
Not dentures. They're false in that they're not made of what our teeth are made of, dentin and enamel, but they still have bite.
They're actually projections of bone. So they're little spikes of bone, and they alternate in size. So there's like a small and the medium and a large in sequence, and they undulate in that pattern.
And they were probably great for piercing and holding slippery stuff.
So like something like a fish or a squid, that would be very good to grasp onto.
Besides the fishy fake teeth, the bird's shoulder bones were also strange. The shoulder blades were teeny tiny, and the bone that attaches to it had an unusual shape.
Just doesn't look like it could really rotate in the same way a normal bird can. And so this bird may not have really been able to lift its wing like above the level of its back. And so it's not flapping like a gull. It's not flapping like a songbird.
Picture a cardinal getting off the ground, pushing its wings up and down, fast and hard. This behemoth likely just spread its 20-foot wings and let the wind do the work.
It's like a giant kite. And so it probably just got into the air either from, facing into the wind, maybe giving a little awkward running start, maybe using elevation to its advantage.
And then once this bird was aloft, Dan said it could probably soar for great distances.
I wouldn't be surprised if, Pelagornis could just cross the Atlantic and stop over in Africa or Europe and then come back as part of its seasonal migration.
This species, Pelagornis sandersi, has only been found in Charleston, but its relatives, other birds in this fake tooth flock, show up all over.
They are everywhere throughout the world. And so we found fossils in Antarctica, New Zealand, and, Washington and Oregon, in Europe, in Africa, in South America. They're literally known from every continent.
Between the huge size and the fake teeth, Pelagornis might be one of the weirdest birds in Earth's history. And the thought that flies into my head is, how did this bird come to be? Dan thinks the appearance of this group of birds, the Pelagornithids, may have to do with the disappearance of other strange, giant flying creatures.
In the case of Pelagornithids, this particular role would be filled by flying reptiles in the Cretaceous period. Some of those species would be far larger even than Pelagornis, and they die out in the same extinction event that kills off the non-avian dinosaurs. And that allows a new group to maybe explore the very large flying animal role, and Pelagornithids are the first group that seizes that.
They swooped into an open niche. And I heard the same thing from many of the big bird researchers I talked to for this series, that these giant birds trundle onto the scene in part because the mass extinction cleared the competition. And that didn't just mean dinosaurs, other reptiles and early birds went extinct too. So the survivors had access to resources and ecosystems that weren't available before. And I've heard a lot about the mammalian radiation over the years, that mammals had their heyday when dinos disappeared. But in a post-dinosaur world, birds also spread their wings and speciated.
There is a spectacular radiation of birds happening in the first few million years after that mass extinction. So the modern birds' ancestors have the chance to explore arboreal habitats or predatory habitats or aquatic habitats kind of for the first time. And they go a little bit wild.
Pelagornis is just the beginning. We've got more wild birds to meet in the next few episodes. Birds that rose like a phoenix after the dinosaurs went extinct and became unlike any birds still alive today.
So like elephant birds may have been the largest bird that ever lived.
Some could have been up to 1,000 kilos, which is a ton. I mean, that's why they're called elephant birds, right?
That's on the next episode of this 4-part Science Quickly fascination on the real big birds. Our show is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Talika Bose, and Kelso Harper. The theme music was composed by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. Head over to scientificamerican.com for in-depth science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Flora Lichtman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The framers of the Constitution were concerned about two things. First, the emergence of a tyrannical executive in the presidency, and second, a tyranny of a majority in Congress. So they designed a unique and complicated system intended to prevent either forms of tyranny from emerging while still carrying out the responsibilities of a Republican government. To accomplish this goal, the framers created in the Constitution three separate governmental institutions at the national level. They gave each a primary responsibility and the authority and powers necessary to carry it out. They gave Congress the primary responsibility and power to make laws. They gave the presidency the primary responsibility and power to implement and enforce the laws made by Congress. Finally, they gave the federal court system, led by the Supreme Court, the primary responsibility and power to manage disputes over the meaning, implementation, and enforcement of the laws and the interpretation of the meaning of the Constitution. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Do mass protests matter anymore? Even when large numbers turn out with a high level of outrage directed at abusive corporate or governmental elites, the powers that be usually just hunker down and wait for the fury to pass. But the one form of protest that actually gets to even the most aloof elite is cultural caricature. In recent decades, the creative deployment of giant puppets, satirical songs, pop-up parodies, and other forms of social mockery has pierced the ego shields of haughty corporate chieftains and puffed-up politicos. They ignore angry speeches, but public ridicule stings them personally, energizing the larger community. Consider how common household utensils can rally the people's discontent, rattle the establishment, and deliver a message of revolutionary protest. In recent years, mass rebellions armed with nothing but kitchenware have noisily made their points in such disparate places as Chile and Iceland. And today, the people of France are bedeviling their country's aristocratic wannabe, President Emmanuel Macron, with a ceaseless mass clanging of skillets, saucepans, spoons, and other plebeian cookware brought from their French kitchens into the streets of every region. They are protesting the president's imperious decision to undercut their pensions, as well as his tone-deaf refusal even to hear their complaints. So their voice has become the incessant banging of pots. Now, Macron can't go anywhere without being greeted and often drowned out by the cacophony of casserolade, the saucepan movement. The protest is driving Macron crazy, which seems to be a very short ride for him. Clearly irritated by the commoner's cleverness, his government is now using anti-terrorism laws to ban, quote, the use of portable sound devices in protests. This is Jim Hightower saying the crazier he gets about pots and pans, the louder people laugh at their leader. Howdy-ho, folks, and thanks for tuning in to my Hightower radio commentaries. And guess what? There's even more Hightower waiting for you online. Subscribers to my Substack newsletter, Jim Hightower's Lowdown, get commentaries, articles, interviews with progressive sparklies, live events, historical nuggets, and more. Go to jimhightower.substack.com to sign up, and you'll get more. That's jimhightower.substack.com.
Danger, danger, go back, go back! Books ahead!
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Escambia County, Florida, has been sued for banning books in its school libraries. Among the books, Tango Makes Three, the award-winning children's book, a true story about a penguin family in the Central Park Zoo with two fathers, a situation apparently not a biggie in the penguin world. So far, the school committee has removed 10 books, including Tango, contrary to the recommendation of the expert review committee, which said keep the books on the shelves. But the school committee didn't, and in fact, changed the policy about what happens to books that have been approved that are being challenged. A challenge book used to stay put during the review process. Now, books being challenged are indefinitely quarantined in a restricted area in the school library that children cannot enter without prior parental permission, an obvious disincentive that raises a kind of penguin and the egg problem. How can kids check out a book or ask for parental permission if they can't hold it in their hands and look at it? As Suzanne Nossel, the CEO of PEN America, one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, said, this school district offers a vivid and disturbing example of what's happening across the country with politically motivated, ideologically driven, viewpoint-based bans on books.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1981. That was the day that the cannery murders took place in Seattle, Washington. Two union organizers, Silmy Domingo and Jean Vernez, were gunned down at their labor hall. They were working to reform the cannery industry for Local 37 of the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union. Silmy and Jean were second-generation Filipino Americans. They organized against the discrimination and segregation faced by Filipino workers who labored in the summer Alaskan fishery canning industry. They were also part of a reform effort trying to build more transparency and accountability within the union local's leadership. Frustrated by the lack of support by Local 37 for the anti-discrimination campaign, the two organizers founded a legal advocacy group, the Alaska Cannery Workers Association. The ACWA filed lawsuits on behalf of the Filipino workers under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The ACWA won their cases in court, but both the canneries and the local union blacklisted ACWA members. The court ordered the reformers reinstated. Back at Local 37, the reformers formed a rank-and-file group to fight for change in the union. Then, on that fateful day, Silmy and Jean were shot by members of a local street gang. But weeks later, when the gun was found that was used in the murders, it was registered to the president of Local 37, Tony Baruzzo. An investigation found that the murders were the result of a conspiracy that went all the way to Filipino dictator Ferdinand Marcos, who wanted to silence Filipino opposition to the United States. Tony Baruzzo was eventually tried and convicted for the murders. Silmy and Jean are now honored by the ILWU as brave reformers who gave their lives for their union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are expecting abundant sunshine today. Highs in the mid to upper 70s with winds out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the upper 40s, low 50s. Winds out of the north winds at a brisk 10 to 15 miles per hour, then decreasing to less than 5 miles per hour later. Mainly sunny tomorrow with highs in the mid-80s. Winds out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated very high in this little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 23 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at level 8, so do take care. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.05 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 70%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 65 degrees and sunny. Paris is 81 degrees and sunny. Rome is 81 and fair. Kyiv is 80 degrees and sunny. Kabul is 62 and clear. Hong Kong is 86 and fair. Tokyo is 70 degrees with rain showers. Sydney, Australia is 58 and partly cloudy. San Francisco is, in California, of course, is 55 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Monica Shilowska of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A priceless 16th century Italian painting that was looted by Nazi Germany during World War II and discovered in Japan has been returned to Poland. Authorities in Warsaw said yesterday, Wednesday. The Madonna with Child, attributed to Alessandro Turci, is the latest of some 600 looted artistic pieces that Poland has successfully repatriated. More than 66,000 so-called war losses remain unaccounted for. The painting was handed over during a ceremony at Poland's embassy in Tokyo on Wednesday. Culture Minister Piotr Gliński told reporters in Warsaw that the Baroque painting was on the Nazis' list of the 521 most valuable pieces of art among the tens of thousands of artworks that they looted when they occupied Poland between 1939 and 1945. He said it was not easy to explain the history behind the looted works as well as the need for their return, but he said the Madonna with Child was returned following negotiations with the Japanese side, and the Mainchi Auction Inc., as well as the person who was in possession of the painting, that decided to return it to Poland without any costs.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
This last amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is brought to us by staff at the Associated Press, but unfortunately, there seems to be a glitch at the Associated Press news site, and the article will not load, other than the fact that we do know that this wildfire that is unprecedented on the Atlantic coast has been burning for 5 days, and there is no ETA on when they will have it under control. So we'll keep a look on that, and that will bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.